Mina the Hollower is one of the most expected indie action-adventure games of 2026, made by the same people behind one of the most iconic indie video games of all time, such as Shovel Knight. And thanks to the team at Yacht Games that was kind enough to give me an early key to give Mina the Hollower a try, today I'm gonna take you into the adventure with a preview video of the game ahead of its release. So let's get into it. And to be completely honest with you, when you start playing this game, you boot it up, you get the first cinematic, and then later you engage with the gameplay, it feels exactly like what it's supposed to be. It has those 8-bit graphics, right? The retro style that is so nostalgic, and it still looks really cool when you enjoy games like this. It has also that feeling of like the Game Boy Color action-adventure games, the old Zelda titles, everything is there and the right place at the right time. And I gotta say that if you're a fan of this type of game, I think that you should for sure consider giving it a try. When the actual gameplay of the game starts, in my opinion, you're already super connected with some of the key aspects of the game as a title. For example, right away, it seems like everything is rooted on a super specific story and narrative, and there is a very clear kind of like style of world building that is going to help you to experience the overall progress within the game. Then on top of that, you get to the actual gameplay and you choose your first weapon, and you have 3 options that you can choose at the start, and even though you can modify this later, it is very clearly a sign that there is a lot of independence and freedom on how you want to experience the actual gameplay of the game. And then after that, you get hit by the first boss of the actual title. And it is very interesting because it is something quite challenging that is hard to play against, but not impossible. And it gives you that first kind of like vibe of how the experience of the gameplay is going to be, and it's going to have a lot of challenges, but at the same time, it's going to give you an opportunity to master the game. Then later down the line, when you experience the gameplay and find more enemies, you can see that the combat, even though it's quite simple, at the same time, it is very, very engaging because there are multiple gameplay design decisions that make the combat super satisfying. For example, even though you have your main weapon that you can choose at the start and also change later, you also have secondary weapons, and you're gonna see a couple, in the first sections of the game, since I'm avoiding showing anything advanced to not spoil anybody that is watching this video ahead of release. But the thing with the secondary weapons, at least at the start, is that they clearly have a role that is complementary to your main weapon that is more melee or mid-range, and then the secondaries are like long-range projectile style weapons, and that is already something so satisfying to have on a game like this, that is, this Game Boy Color action-adventure style game that gives you that deeply engaging combat that is also not immensely complex. Then on top of that, you start to master movement, and you start to use the movement in the game to find multiple bosses and mobs or enemies, and actually it gives you an advantage in combat when it comes to, for example, dodging attacks or actually trying to not get hit while you're fighting other enemies. There is also, for example, multiple enemies that you can only hit if you are in the air while you're attacking, or you use a secondary weapon that has a hitbox that actually is also in the air. And that is something that to me was such a good detail when it comes to designing the combat and not always being a grounded experience, because it makes you choose every single action that you do in the gameplay, even though it is quite simple, to engage with the combat on a precise way as a player. And I think that in games like this, that keeps you kind of going, right? And it makes you feel never bored with the overall gameplay loop, because there are micro interactions within the context of the gameplay of this RPG or action-adventure game that makes it feel different constantly. And then the more that you experience the gameplay and the combat, the more engaging that it becomes, because it has so many layers that are complementary to each other. You have your close quarters combat with your first weapon, then you also have the range attacks with your secondary weapon, you have all the enemies that you can only engage with if you attack them in the air, and then you have your underground dash that also gives you a special type of jump with more range that allows you to use some movement in fights and kind of like engage with combat on a different way when necessary. So even though, again, the combat is really simple, all the complementary layers are so cool that it makes it feel like it's always something refreshing and new. Another thing that to me was a super big highlight of the gameplay of Mina the Hollower was the usage of platforming and also movement to kind of like engage with the world and the map. Because in most of these action-adventure, like Game Boy Color style games or kind of like a Link to the Past inspired titles, a lot of the time there is a giant focus on the combat, and that's it. And even though that can be super cool, it can feel sometimes limiting to the big overall experience of the entire playthrough that you're gonna do with the game. But in Mina the Hollower, there is a lot of engagement with the gameplay that is related to platforming and also to using movement to access, for example, secret sections of the map that have items or maybe upgrades for your character and more. So it was a really cool, unique twist of the game to kind of like mix, the action adventure, simple but engaging gameplay that we have already been talking about with also all the platforming and the always discovering secrets, always trying to explore the map to find something new and put all of that into one gameplay experience and make it a formula. It feels super cool, and at the same time it makes you feel like you're always going to find something new when you're playing the game. It's like there's always a secret, there's always an underground section that you haven't visited, or maybe a type of boss fight or a specific enemy that you haven't encountered because you're not exploring all the corners of the map. And to me, that was one of the highlights of experiencing the first couple of hours of the game. And the last point that I also wanted to highlight when it comes to this game is actually the world and the map. Because even though there's a clear kind of like narrative and story to the world building of the game, at the same time, it feels like an open world action adventure game that has linearity into it. It's not like the game is 100% a story-driven narrative linear game, but also it's not 100% an open world like action adventure game. It's like right in the middle, and it feels so cool to actually play the game and engage with the story, but also always have something else to do that is not forced in the journey of how you experience the game. This is something that I really appreciated when I played the game and I give it a try, because it feels so refreshing to have a world that is not fully open world or fully linear. It's like right in the middle ground. It feels balanced, it feels fresh, and I really liked it. So I wanted to give credit into that, because Mina the Hollower, in terms of its map and the world, feels like the perfect mix of the two styles of games that we're always getting nowadays, right? Completely linear or completely open world. A big thank you again to the people and the team at Yacht Games that gave me the opportunity to have an early key and make a preview video of the title. It means a lot, especially taking into consideration that this is highly likely going to be one of the coolest indie action adventure games of the year. And now, let me actually leave you with some Mina the Hollower gameplay.